In this video, we'll be talking a little bit about functions. It's kind of a broad scope, so we'll try to talk about the main topics in here. What are functions? I think is the first thing we could say. Functions are logical structures that we can organize our codes and execute them in the order that we want and manipulate the way we want it. And we build those abstractions so we can have separate blocks and a more logically organized code. Python then it's a little bit different than other languages because you can define your function using the def keyword. And let's say we have a function, it's called that the sign, and we'll be using a parameter here. We'll have other videos talking about parameters, but think this is the information that we're gonna pass when we execute this function in order to run the specific task that we want. So let's say we're gonna get this x there, and we're gonna verify if this x is greater than a certain value as been 0, and then we'll return some text saying yeah. This is a positive number. Else elif, because we want to do another verification in case x is less than 0. We're going to go there and we're going to return this as a negative number. So negative number or a negative message, right? Let's just fix the scope here for us. Yeah. And then don't forget, always when we have an if and else case, we need to have the last else is like our default case, right? So in this case right here, if it's not greater than 0 or less than 0, we're gonna go there and return that's 0. And there we go. We have our first function. And if we run this function right here, we'll see that we don't have any message because the function was just being defined, right? Now, how are we going to call our function? Given that our function was already defined, we could say like, let's give a list of numbers that we're going to execute throughout side function. So we can say that we have a certain a, and this a here is being placed in certain numbers, like -1, a 0, a 1, 42, -42, and why not 0 again, right? And then we're checking out for every value of a, we're going to do the following. We're going to print it out. But what we're going to print? We're going to print the call of that function, more specifically the return, and then we pass as an argument the letter a, which is going to have every value for each number here in our for loop, right? Then we're going to go ahead and sign this. And what we have is that for every value of a, we're calling our function with a different argument. So when we use a function call and we pass something for that function, this guy here is called argument. But then this argument here is passed out to our parameter definition that we had in our function definition. So for every value that we have for a, this value of a is also referenced by x in here. And then we take the value and do the proper verification. For the first one here, it checks if it's 0, it's greater than x is greater than 0. No, it's not. If it's less than 0, that's true. And then we return the negative. When we return this here, we're going to print whatever the information returned for us. We don't necessarily need to return anything. We can just, let's say, we can just comment this line here and run it, and we'll have pretty much the same behavior. Let's say we just have here like print an empty string or whatever. So we don't necessarily need to return, but if you, in this case here, we are. Okay, this is a case where we actually calling a function inside a structure. Oops, let's return that. And the thing is, we can also define, as we saw in a previous tutorial, we can say that we have a function. Let's say here, we have a function. This function has no parameters, and we're gonna go there and say, hey, this function here is gonna print hello. Function. And that's it. So as you can see here, there's no return statement. By the time we call this function is going to go there and call and just print it out this message, right? And then what we have is here, let's define another function. Let's call my other function. I have here my other function. There is no parameter to it. And then we're going to do the following. We're going to print hello, I am another function. And then we're going to do the following, and we're going to go there and execute our both functions. So in this case here is saying that we're going to call my function, and as we saw, there is no parameter, and then we have my other function, as we have here. And let's run our both functions, and we'll see that each function is going to be executed one at a time. One thing we can do is, let's say we are now calling one function inside the other. This is very possible and much more common. It is common, right? So we can do the following. When we call my other function, we should print it out this message, hello, I'm another function, but then I'm going to go there and call my function. And there you go. Let's run this here. And as we can see, what is the first function that was executed? My other function. So we printed out this message, and then after that, we have another call, which calls the first function right here, which was executed right in the following. Okay, this is just to show that we can either have each function being called one at a time, we can pass no parameters, or we can pass some parameters, or we can even call one function inside the other. Another thing we can do is, let's modify this here so we don't have this information, and then now when we call our first function right here, instead of returning this, we're gonna instead of printing out, we're gonna go there and we're gonna return that information. So if we just do this here and run the way we have it right now, our function, we'll see that just function 2 had it printed out. And why? Because the first function, when it was called, we didn't have printed out, we have just a return, which means that this function here was called and returned something, but we are not doing anything with this. So we can do the following. Let's call this result. So when we call our function with a return, what is happening behind the scenes is this function is executed and return whatever information we describe here after the return. In this case, is a message. So we're going to go there, execute function 1, return to a verbal result, and then what we're going to do is we're going to print out something like this result of my function. And let's give some space here. And then let's print it out result to see what is going on there. And since we already know what my other function is going to go, we'll just go there and comment, right? So if we run this here, we'll see that function 1 was executed, my function, and then it returned a result. We concatenated that result with the information here inside our print. So this function returned the text to the variable result. Okay, so thank you and happy coding.